Hi everyone, thank you for joining. We can wait a couple more minutes to let other people who want to join. Um, and then we can start.
Alessandro, I just want to make a quick announcement. Hi, everyone.
Yep.
I'm Angi. I'm IP's communication coordinator. I will be the one who is going to administrate this Zoom. So if there is any technical problems, you can chat me through Zoom. My name is IP Angi. And then if you need interpretation, if you're joining from desktop, you can click more and then choose the interpretation in Spanish. And also we have another caption. You can also choose the caption and translate it to the language that you prefer if you don't speak Spanish or talk in Spanish. Thank you so much. Over to you, Alessandro.
Yeah, thank you, Angi. That's very helpful to share. Um, all right, I guess we can start, and if other people will join later, they will. Yeah. Join. So again, thanks everyone for joining today. Yeah, we are, I'm Alessandro, and I'm going to moderate this meeting, this discussion. I'm a researcher at an international accountability project, currently based in Italy. And International Accountability Project is an organization supporting, promoting the right to development through access to information and research and support to local communities advocacy with development banks, companies, and governments. At International Accountability Project, we host the early warning system, which is co-managed by partner civil society organizations worldwide, including an established group of co-administrators from Latin America. And the idea behind the early warning system is to ensure timely access to project information to communities worldwide and to promote inclusive development processes by empowering local rights holders with information to contribute to the decisions that affect their livelihoods. Um, and yeah, that said, before I continue with the introduction, I invite you all to share your name and location and affiliation in the chat if you feel comfortable doing that. And yeah, So at IP, we are part of different global coalitions, including the Stop Financing Factory Farming Coalition, which is international coalition of civil society organizations collaborating with and
di
supporting
organizaciones
the efforts of local
que
groups around the
soportan
world to monitor the impacts
todo el
of
mundo
industrial
para
livestock
monitorear
sector
los
infrastructure
impactos
that is financed by development banks, such as the World Bank, Asian Development Bank, and European Bank for Reconstruction and Development. The coalition is currently supporting and collaborating with local communities in Ecuador, Guatemala, Brazil, Guinea, Bangladesh, Croatia, Ukraine, and Vietnam, among other countries, and advocating with development banks to promote a shift towards more sustainable community-led solutions in the agriculture sector, such as agroecology. And with the early warning system, we ensure proper monitoring and tracking of development banks investments in industrial animal agriculture to ensure early actions and stronger evidence-based advocacy with different stakeholders, including financiers, governments, and private sector actors. With this monitoring that we did over the years, we noticed that development banks act both at the policy and infrastructure level, and research that we did and that will be presented later, shows that they tend to push for industrialization through both these types of interventions. So yeah, in 2024, we decided to try and collect in a study development banks' investment trends in the animal agriculture sector, with the idea of getting to know them a bit better, to get to know our targets better, and to be better able to influence their decisions and empower local communities with information to be able to influence these financial decisions. So we published a white paper back then, and then thanks to the Tiny Bean Fund's support, we were also able to expand the research, also with the support of academics who share the same research and advocacy interests. And they're here today to share more about the findings of these research that we carried out in 2025. And that, yeah, we also plan to expand if and when possible. So yeah, without further ado, I'm glad to present our panel today. We have Dr. Meroush Tak, who is a reader in economics at the SOAS University of London. Meroush has a background in international development, and her current research investigates the financialization of food systems and the constraints of neoliberal policymaking, with a specific focus on the development. Meroush is the founder and convener of the Critical Research on Industrial Livestock Systems, CRILS, a network of academics and practitioners who challenge narratives surrounding livestock production systems. We also have Dr. Lavinia Scudiero, who is a researcher and consultant in food systems and livestock policy, based in Italy, and her current research critically examines the role of public finance in shaping livestock production systems. We then have Angela Delia Vasquez Cabrera, who is an expert in community development strategies from Texisco, Guatemala, and member of the board of directors of the Consejo, Coordinador del Pueblo Xinka de Guatemala, the coordinating council of the Xinka people of Guatemala. She collaborates with various community-based groups to advocate nationally and internationally for indigenous peoples and women's rights. I will now pass, unless there are any questions, at this point, I will pass the word to Meroush to share a bit more context about this research and dive into the discussion. Thanks, Meroush. Your mic is off.
I was just about to ask you if you could hear me, but I was starting with my thank yous to IAP, specifically Alessandro and Angie, for supporting this work and also organizing this seminar. I know how much time it takes. I really appreciate it. This work is, as Alessandro has described, been ongoing for a while, something that IAP has been doing for a really long time, and something that Lavinia, who you will hear from soon, and I jumped on about a year and a half, maybe 2 years ago, given our shared interest in understanding development finance. And to me, this project and the presentation today is a really good example of grassroots community organizations and NGOs working with academics and extending the shared interest in targeted advocacy at the moment. So what I want to do, I will only take another 4-ish or so minutes to contextualize this research that we've been doing. And I'm sure Alessandro and others here today can describe what this means for advocacy purpose later on. This work is jointly done with Lavinia, who, as I said, will be the next speaker. And here, whilst today we only want to talk about development finance, I do want to contextualize in the context in which this financial landscape is working. So very quickly, you may have seen these numbers before, but the production of meat has increased drastically from 1960s onwards. There's almost been a 400% increase in production of meat globally. So you can see majority of this is because of poultry. and pig meat production, the other species have more or less remained consistent over the period of time we're considering. More importantly, approximately 65% of pigs, 95% of chickens are produced in intensive production systems. It's not just the fact these animals are produced for consumption, but they're also produced in very intensive systems and not in what it would be their natural environment. For cattle, this number is 75%. At the same time, the availability of these meats globally is very unevenly distributed. In this graph, you can see United States and the Americas and high-income countries like United Kingdom and other parts of Europe have much higher availability of meat than the global majority countries in Africa and Asia. In fact, for Africa, as you can see, this line of meat supply has remained more or less consistent over the last 60 years period that we are considering here in this graph. In Asia, it has obviously increased, but a lot of this increase is due to Chinese consumption. So there are other inequalities in the rest of Asia. So all of this to say that whilst production of meat has increased rapidly, there is the threat of triple burden of malnutrition at the same time. So increased production does not automatically correlate to increased consumption globally. But today, the point of this presentation and the seminar is to think about the financing of these livestock systems. Where do these systems come about, and why has the proliferation of pig meat and poultry consumption production increased so much and so rapidly over a short period of time? So one of the things that we have realized through our research is that intensification of livestock production systems is a key determinant. And this is led by corporate concentration, both through vertical and horizontal integration, where the same companies produce everything from your genetics of animals to retail of the food in many countries. So this integration has meant that there are certain types of production systems that are hegemonic and are the kind of systems that govern the value chain and therefore what we are also consuming. I won't go into it too much in detail because this is just to contextualize things, but the other determinant here has been the financialization of livestock production systems, both through the role of private equity and what I call passive cartelization, where the same asset management firms, such as like the pension funds and so on, have multiple shares in competitors in an industry. So the BlackRocks of the world, so these are big asset management firm, will buy up shares in the competing feed industry firms, which would mean that like the stakeholders' desire for profit making is not based on competitiveness in the industry, but rather collusion in the industry. And then the impact of this is that there's proliferation of private standards that can have trade limiting or market distorting effects, specifically on like smallholder farmers and the inability of smallholder farmers to participate in these value chains and in the market because a few firms have taken over a majority of the market share. In this context, what is important is also to understand what are the public actors doing. So this is all the private sector firm, but what are the public actors doing? And this is where IAP and our work really comes together to investigate the role of public development banks in determining and shaping these livestock systems that are very much hegemonic globally at the moment. So this work with IAP is based on analysis of 16 development banks and their data on livestock projects. We, with Alessandro and Lavinia, cleaned and collated a large data set to identify specific livestock-related projects that have been invested in by 16 banks. And we question here, what are the trends in financing over these 5 years and who benefits from this finance? The big headline is that between 2020 and 2024, USD almost 30 billion were invested in animal agriculture globally. So now I'm going to pass it on to my colleague, Lavinia, who, apologies, one second. Yeah. Who will go into the depth of like what we have done so far and what is the meaning of this analysis. Thank you, Lavinia.
Can you see I think, can you see my screen? Yeah, I see you nodding. Okay, thank you, Mirush, for are you seeing it in
No,
I
we can't see the full screen. We can see the presentation.
Yeah, I'm trying to fix it. Sorry. How about now?
Yes.
Yeah, good. Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Mirush, for passing the floor to me and Alessandro and IT team for the invitation. And Lavinia Scudiera have already been introduced, so I will take the time to skip this. Yeah, following on what Mirush already explained, why this research? This started as work that the EAP already did in 2023, and where we saw that development banks do shape food systems, particularly when they concern the livestock sector. They shape livestock development pathways. They shape market concentration, as Mirush has explained, national agricultural policies, access to land, feed, breeds, and veterinary system, and as well as the future of smallholder farmers. At the same time, there is a limited global picture of how livestock finance look. So this research comes from this need to answer a couple of questions on who gets funded, how and what systems are promoted, and what's the overall effect of this financing. As Mirush introduced, to do this research, we worked with the AWS platform. From agriculture and forestry project, we skimmed through them and we arrived to 400 projects involving livestock. And these 400 projects were projects by 16 development banks. Our analysis was restricted to 5 years, from 2020 to 2024. And on top of using the database, then we had document reviews of all the 16 banks, as well as couple of key informant interviews, sometimes with banks whenever accessible, as well as NGOs and other researchers that have been involved in analyzing the livestock sector financing. And one major output of this research, on top of the findings, was that we came up with a novel classification methodology because skimming through the project, we realized, and you've written it before, but also we realized that sometimes banks have are not too transparent and are not too harmonized when they report projects. So we tried to come up with a methodology that can be replicable in the future if other work is being done in this field. In terms of funding, the major highlight, as Mirush explained, is that 28.7 billion of US dollar are invested in animal agriculture globally. The major funders is the World Bank Group, World Bank, as well as the private arm IFC, and as well as some regional development banks, such as the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development and the Asian Development Bank. One of the major funding, apart from finding how much is invested, is that we saw that the majority of fundings do go into livestock, industrial livestock, apart from the World Bank, who has almost like not 50-50, but almost 50-50 share into non-industrial livestock systems. The other banks all lean towards industrial livestock for their funding choice. So this was a major finding, let's say. We also saw that private finance grew throughout the year. In the last 5 years, there's been an increase in private financing, and we saw that in the last year of our analysis, private finance exceeded public finance. And so we have been able to show and see a growing role of private sector engagement in this financing. We also were able to show what is being financed in the animal agriculture sphere. The majority goes into terrestrial livestock, so mostly ruminants, small and large ruminants, followed by the aquaculture sector and feed production. The majority of private investment were into poultry system, support system, aquaculture, and feed value chain and manufacturers. Another finding is that the regional distribution was quite, let's say, even in the global south, with Africa receiving the largest share of funding, followed by Asia and Latin America and the Caribbean. However, an important finding was that we saw that in Africa, the majority of funding were quite well spread across all countries, and these fundings were used for public good-oriented projects, while in the other regions, the focus was only on a couple of countries, namely China and Mongolia in Asia, Brazil in Latin America, and Ukraine in Europe. And the fundings for these countries, as well as these regions, were mostly focused on large industry-focused investments. We also had a look at financial mechanisms used by banks to fund these projects or these systems, and the majority of instruments used were loan followed by grants, mostly for policy reform and market integration. And we saw an increase, although small, of equity and guarantees and financial intermediaries towards industrial system and large-scale actors. We didn't find evidence of a lot of innovative financial instruments that recently the banks have been advocating for to fund more smaller mixed system livestock systems. So that was also an important finding. And so we highlight in these financial mechanisms and a critical gap that system that underpin resilience, biodiversity, and livelihood support in many regions and under prioritized, although the development banks claim to support all the sustainable development goals when funding projects. And even when projects claim to support smallholders, smallholder farmers remain dependent on imported feed, commercial breeds, pharmaceutical and external technology. So we argue that this creates an inclusion into dependency and smallholders are integrated into value chain, but corporate actors and big actors retain the control and the profits over the system. So the take-home message of the research, which has been crafted in a policy brief as well as in a hopefully academic paper to be published within this year, is that development finance is not natural. It does shape livestock system. It has been shaping livestock system at least in about 5 years, and it will have a role also in the future as the development work is arguing for more fundings for the livestock sector. And so with the recommendation we have been writing in our product is to rebalance finance towards smallholders, especially taking into account that this is the year of the International Year of Rangeland Pastoralists. And so we have been crafting our recommendation also to influence a bit this International Year outcome, then to strengthen safeguards of the system and to better align finance with climate, biodiversity, and rights for everybody, as well as improving the reporting. As one major challenge we had was the reporting system of the bank differed, and most of them were not transparent in which kind of system they are financing, which kind of species, and also on the impacts of their fundings. And this is hope. I hope I was well in time and time given, and yeah, thank you again to all the colleagues that collaborated in this research. It was a joint effort and we very much enjoyed it.
I just have one additional thank you to say. Firstly, thanks Lavinia for the very, very good presentation, and just very important thank you to our funders also, because without them, this kind of work will not be possible. And in all the other thank yous in the presentation, I kind of forgot to say that. So thanks very much to Tiny Bean Fund.
Yep. Thank you, Marush and Lavinia. For expanding on the need and relevance and also the timeliness of such research, and for providing an overview of the findings. And diving into the different trends and investment trends that we expose through this research. While all of these may sound like simple numbers, far from reality, but in the end, they have great impacts on people's lives, and understanding who does what. That is to say, like what institution invests in what sector and where, in what amount, provides valuable information to advocates locally and internationally, who are able to identify targets, leverage points, and ensure information reaches local communities in the mostly targeted countries or regions in a timely way. We can also understand how development banks support industrialization processes and expose their wrongdoings when they do so, where and when needed. And we can hold them accountable when their operations lead to abuses and violations of environmental and human rights, including attacks against environmental and human rights defenders. The industrial livestock sector, as Lavina and Marush were saying, has great adverse impacts on both people and environment, and that includes indigenous peoples many times, as shown by the voices of the Xinka in Guatemala, the Apinache in Brazil, the Tzachila in Ecuador, and the Mayan in the Yucatan Peninsula in Mexico, to mention a few. Our next speaker, Angela Delia Vasquez Cabrera, will expand on her experience as part of groups in Guatemala advocating against the expansion of factory farming. So over to you, Angela. Thank you for being here with us today.
Jalapari, buenos días en Xinka, que nuestro creador derrame bendiciones en cada uno, que las
that our
energías del
Creator
aire, del agua, del
bless
fuego
us
y de
as
la
well,
tierra
that the energies of
y el espíritu de
water,
nuestros
fire,
ancestros
the
nos
land,
acompañen
the wind,
siempre.
and the spirits of our ancestors
Hoy
follow us all
me
the
siento
time.
muy contenta
Today, I
de
feel
estar
very
compartiendo esta
happy
mañana con
for
cada
being
uno de
here,
ustedes.
sharing this morning with each one of
La
you.
verdad es que cuando hablamos del
Actually,
pueblo Xinka,
when we talk
hablamos
about
de
this
vida, hablamos
Xinka
también de
people, we talk about
espiritualidad,
life,
de
we
identidad
talk about
y de futuro.
spirituality,
No
identity,
es
and future.
solo la tierra, ¿verdad? Sino que también
It's
tenemos
not only
muchas
the land,
características que
but
nos
we also
identifican
have
como pueblo
other
Xinka.
characteristics that identify ourselves
Pero
as Xinka people.
también
But
podemos decir que tenemos
we can
amenazas
also say
reales,
that we
¿verdad?
have real
Ahora
threats
pues con estos proyectos
for
que han
real.
venido a
So
nuestro
now with
territorio,
these projects that
tenemos
have come to our territory,
problemáticas,
well, we have
especialmente
some
del medio
problems,
ambiente, de
especially
la
in terms
contaminación,
of environment,
porque
contamination,
a veces
pollution,
no
because
se hacen
sometimes
estudios previos, no se
we don't
cuenta
do previous
con
studies,
el territorio, con las comunidades.
they don't
Tenemos un convenio,
even
el
consider
convenio
territory
169 de la
communities.
OIT,
We have this
que dice
partnership
que
in
tiene que haber una
with the
consulta previa,
IoT that
pero
it demands to have a
lamentablemente a
previous
veces
consultation, but
no se hace.
unfortunately, many
¿Por qué?
times
Por
they don't
las
do it.
influencias de poder.
Why? Due to the influence of power. So when we are in the territories, when we realize companies are already here, positioned here, we go, we report it, but we also have some proposals. We have military organizations, advocacy, and other alliances, just like the indigenous community. So for ourselves, what has affected us is when we saw this for years, when we realized it was already established, this company, there was no consultation. It was mandatory to do this consultation to the Xinka indigenous community, because in Guatemala there are 4 people, right? But we are the Xinka people. We have some communities that are affected more than others. But the one is this agrarian community, La Florida, that's how it's called, because the machine it's very noisy. So every day they listen to this noise and all the time. So this is a big problem that maybe that in long term they have this ear problems. So and also um, breath diseases due to the pollution of the environment. And about the other communities that are affected, another one is La Campesina, La Libertad, and then Caserillo, San Pedrito, these other communities. I think internet connection. Okay. They can smell very bad smell. So when they take the chicken, when they export it in the trucks, you can smell very bad smell. So that also affects them. And the families that are affected, we are around 500 families. Yeah, so as I said, there was no previous consultation. When we realized they were already here, installed here, there was not even one job for us. We know that these companies bring development, but well, development actually, if it's done with an alliance with us, according to respecting some conveniences that we have, it will strengthen our community. But when they don't respect the community, there's no development. It's an abuse of power. So ourselves here in our community, we are worried because in the end, the problem exists and the threat as well, right? Because in the long term, even if they do some adjustments, we'll have some effects because it will always pollute the environment because of infiltration. So when we talk about this barn, or it was like a farm of citrus, like the lemon trees. But when they sold it to other people, those other people they changed it to a barn. So as I am telling you, to the Xinka community which I belong to, there was no previous consultation. And also, we've had some meetings, technical roundtables with some leaders of the communities. And yes, there were some representatives, but in the end, when we request something to them, you can see like very slow processes. Sometimes there's something so simple that we can see that like the maximum 1 month to solve it, but unfortunately they take a long time. It's not like 1 month. They delegate certain jobs, certain roles, some representatives, they pass to another department. There are many barriers and there's no positive response. So of course there are positive and negative sides and everything, but we can see right now that they're not committing to ourselves. So when we did the technical roundtable, there were some reports. We invited the institutions, for example, the Ministry of Health, representatives of the departments through the municipalities, because municipalities helped us. Well, so far they didn't know about the case. So it's like the mayor who is the legal representative. And the legal communities, they were his president. When he approached it to us and he said that he didn't approach to us and said that this barn would be here. So after this roundtable, we had some agreements. They said that they would support us if there was any request. Well, they just did like the opportunity to have two talks. They improved a little bit the school. They give some equipment, but it's still missing something. And due to certain processes that they need to take. Well, as I said, and I will say it again. Those are not big things, no, not important things, not important investment that they're going to do, and their response is very slow. So to speak, there is no response. So there is this lack of will, especially lack of will. Because when someone wants to do something, when someone wants to support the others, it's immediate. You do it immediately. But here, we can see that they don't want to collaborate. When you came here recently, I had requested through the school some materials because the school, for example, fans for the schools, and there was no response. So they didn't respond to me. Sometimes they say, okay, I am at a meeting right now and I can't tell you something anything right now. So as I can see, there's no will, a goodwill. I know that they have some certain benefits with the banks. And I imagine that they are receiving some percentage so that they focus on the community and those projects that bring benefits to the communities, because actually it's not an individual project, it's a collective project. The communities, they have many needs. Unfortunately, the state is a failed state. So ourselves as the leaders of the communities, we need to touch some doors. So this barn is in an area that belongs to one of the Xinka people areas. Sometimes we would like that these projects, when they come here, they would support us, right? With jobs. But unfortunately, many times they already bring machinery, they bring other people. Our community is not benefited in a high percentage of jobs, workers. We need support from the organizations that are involved, and there is some analysis that you can check with them. What's the reason behind that action from them? Because I know that they have this social obligation due to the contamination, the pollution, especially in the environment. So if you have any questions, it will be my pleasure to reply. In case I don't have the exact date, I can consult it afterwards. Thank you very much.
Yeah, that's just I'm sure what Angela presented here is just a fraction of what people in Taxisco are experiencing in their daily lives because of this. Like large factory farm that was like kind of thrown on their heads with the support of development banks investments. So yeah, now I guess we can dive into the discussion for the next 20 minutes or so, and address. I see the chat is being populated with messages, so we'll address them. And if there are any questions you want to raise with any of the speakers, like feel free also to switch on your mic and speak. Yeah. I also invite you all to check the chat for resources, for the resources that we mentioned during this presentation, and the more information about who is here presenting. So I see a question here in the chat from Nital, who I would direct to either Marush or Lavinia. The question is like, do you have any sense of how much of that private capital is entering because public instruments are absorbing the downside risk? And with private finance now the majority, what is the public share actually adding? Funding projects private capital would back anyway, or de-risking projects private capital won't touch? So do you feel like answering that, Marush, Lavinia?
Yeah, I can go first, and then Lavinia can answer more specifically about about the instruments and stuff. So far, and this is also kind of based on our interviews with various development bank officials, is that the de-risking on livestock side is not the most prominent way of thinking about investment in livestock production systems. And our hunch, based on a couple of conversations, is because livestock investments are not seen as green investments and sustainable because of the greenhouse gas emission conversations and debates that are going on. All livestock is seen as as polluting to greenhouse gas emissions, which in itself is quite a problematic stance because livestock have in extensive systems a lot of ecosystem benefit and biodiversity benefit. So the conversation at the moment between development banks has kind of been hijacked by this green finance conversation, and it's not well informed. So the de-risking stuff is not happening in relation to livestock. It doesn't mean it isn't there. It's just that it is a very small percentage of the portfolio currently, and we are trying to do more work on understanding these new financial instruments that are being used beyond grants and loans to understand how the money is being channeled to private sector firms. Lavinia, do you want to come in?
Yeah, no, just to say that among these public development banks, we haven't seen many of these. I think what you're referring to is blended finance, where both public and private funds come in. This is like, as Maurice was saying, it's like the current research we're trying to do, and we haven't seen that with public development banks. We are exploring other sources of financing, more like from private and maybe development agencies, like to see whether we can see such cases of more innovative finance as everybody's talking about it. But so far we haven't seen any cases there.
Nital, I hope I've answered your question. I'm just trying to find the language again, but feel free to jump in if we haven't answered your question.
Great. I see thumbs up from Nital, so I guess that's, yep. Thanks, Marush. Thanks, Lavina. And apologies. I see someone had issues with the translation. Apologies about that. And so I see another question. about India, like the government saying that the government is pushing factory farming like crazy, and if this is also being pushed from abroad.
Yeah, thank you, Joanna, for the question. So I work a lot on both India, actually, Lavinia and I work on India, and what I have found is it's not necessarily factory farming, it's more like corporatized and industrialization of livestock production systems. We know that in cattle, specifically buffalo meat, is raised in India for export purposes, and that's a value chain that you have very little information about because it's there's a big political economy going on there in terms of who produces it, even though it's very contentious to produce cattle or meat in India because of the politics there, which we don't need to go in today. But we have done an CRILS online workshop on this topic, which you're more than welcome to find on our website. But I will expand this a little bit more beyond just India. I know that in Vietnam, for example, in South Africa, and many other global majority countries, governments think at the moment that industrialization, or more, what in Vietnam is called professionalization of agriculture, is the official national strategy at the moment to make farmers into these big large farm, commercialized farms rather than smallholder farmers, because that's the way to route to market to export in particular. So it's not just for domestic production, but to increase the scope and scale of these farms to be able to produce to more established value chains and supply chains globally. And there are many issues with that. Obviously, the first thing positive of this is that farmers, if the value chain did work and there was proper support for these farmers, these value chains can provide better livelihoods to the farmers. However, what we see is that these strategies are primarily on paper and do not have any infrastructure development or agriculture extension support for farmers to be able to upgrade themselves into the global value chain systems. And there's been plenty of research done over the last few decades on how the global majority farmers tend to lose in these scenarios, because upgrading into global value chains requires a lot of investment from governments, but also trade agreements to be in benefiting global South countries, which they often don't. And these trade agreements are skewed towards the global North, or like rich, higher income countries who govern the global trade market anyway. Additionally, I think with the petrol and the fertilizer crisis that is ongoing because of the Strait of Hormuz, showcases the issues with like these global value chains anyway. So yeah, I'm going a little bit beyond, but I think the question of like further industrialization or commercialization, professionalization of farming has many issues, as the promise of increased incomes actually is, we know we have enough evidence globally that does not actually translate into improved livelihoods for farmers.
Thanks, Mirush. Joanna, I hope, yeah, Mirush's answer was clear, but feel free to follow up in the chat. I see a question for Lavinia from Lorenzo in the chat. Yeah, what criteria are applied? Well, sorry, I'll start from the beginning of this. So about the findings on the support to policy reforms and market integration. So Lorenzo is asking what criteria are applied during the research process to narrow these down to those interventions that directly support livestock. So yeah.
Yeah, there's a question about the methodology, I guess. So we came up with, like, we had a whole list of projects of agriculture and forestry that is downloaded from the platform. And the first criteria was whether the project was animal agriculture, affecting animal agriculture or not. So whenever it was fully stated that animal agriculture was in there, we would have selected that project. So sometimes it was like just a food system project, so that one was excluded. So after narrowing down to that, then we read the project description, the project documents, and whenever possible, we were applying criteria on where the project was focusing on various things, and among all of these, also on where the financing was going to tackle the system and at what level. So, especially in African countries, a lot of projects were on policy support for reforms for livestock systems. So that's where it comes from. So, and then we just whenever it was a policy or market mentioned, then we would classify the project in that regard. So it was a lot of like qualitative clustering to then like bring it down to more like a quantitative figure later on to make some stats out of it. And in here, both me and Alessandro work extensively together to discuss. And like sometimes it was clear that it was a policy reform. Sometimes we had to have hours of discussion on whether to classify that into policy reform or not. And we would jump in here as well. So there's a lot of iteration. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you, Lavinia. Yeah, indeed, the development banks are not well known for their transparency levels. So it's also, yeah, among our demands that they improve their transparency levels across operations. Yeah, thank you. I don't see at the moment other questions in the chat. I have like a couple. Okay, Anita, one more broad question. Which application of that capital does the most to lock in intensive systems per dollar?
Sorry, I'm just trying to read the exact. I'm not sure if I understand the question properly, and I'm sure maybe Lavinia can also jump in. But if the question is like, what kind of if the investment portfolio creates lock-in into intensive systems, yeah, that is definitely the case. We are kind of exploring that a bit more in the future iteration of this research with IAP, where we think that even when say, for example, in Africa, as Lavinia had explained, that in Africa, the development bank investments were a lot more smallholder pro-poor overall. However, they did create still lock-ins because they're trying to develop smallholder access to market by providing them day-old chicks genetics from like the main big conglomerates or big companies that provide global companies that provide these genetics. So essentially, they are creating markets for these global companies that provide genetics and inputs for intensive production systems. So while there's a distinction we make between intensive and industrial production system, intensive is like CAFOs and factory farming systems, but industrial is beyond much more than that. It may be that extensive systems are still industrial because they rely on inputs from the same big companies globally, the same feed companies, the same genetics companies, and so on. So we do think that even pro-poor, smallholder orientated investment can create these kind of lock-ins. Not all of them necessarily, because some of them are genuinely to create, like say, smallholder abattoirs, or like health investments, animal health investments in Africa. And they often are like a multi-species and more value chain development projects that will be more pro-poor projects and genuinely grants. But even in those grants, we find this component of locking into input systems that are very much part of the industrial livestock complex that we've been talking about. Lavinia, do you want to add anything?
I think, yeah, I mean, we only have qualitative evidence in there because of the interviews that we provided, and and some other literature we have been reading about. So I guess there is not much more to answer. I mean, from the analysis we did, we can't really prove that. But from the interview we had, it seems like this is the case, and especially with banks that have more like this development mandate in Africa. Yeah.
Yep. Thanks. Yeah, Nital said the question was answered, so thank you, Marush and Lavinia. I have a question for Angela, if you can expand on the interactions that you had with the company and the financiers, such as the IDP Invest. And yeah, that I know that like Sema Alimentos is a subsidiary of a big, like one of the major industrial conglomerates.
Sí, Alessandro.
Yeah.
No escuché bien la pregunta.
So,
I didn't understand the.
¿Qué interacciones teniste con la compañía y con CMI Alimentos y con los bancos que invirtieron sí, en la corporación? Y CMI Alimentos es parte de un grande conglomerado industrial en el país, en Guatemala.
It's part of a good group.
Razón, tiene la comunidad.
The communities for the work that they do for advocacy of human rights. She has a problem with the signal. Do you listen to me? Yes? Okay. Well, I didn't listen anything from the question, but yes, I understood a little bit that I would just tell more, something more. Yes, I lost a little bit of the signal, but I listen to it now. Well, with the company, this technical table, there were some people responsible for healthcare, environmental, from representatives from the municipality, institutions here that are the ones who are responsible for the environment and to generate licenses, the authorization so that a company can establish here. As I was saying before, there was no previous consultation. Although we are an indigenous community, they just did like a poll to the people. It was like 25 people, maybe, due to the lack of jobs. And when someone said, "Wow, there's going to be work, jobs," wow, everybody was so excited. Everybody was so excited. So people said, yes, they would find work, they would have jobs. But they just consulted some people who were passing by, or people from other territories that would just passing by. This affected a lot ourselves. Also, when they started to establish, yes, the community was affected. This community of La Florida, there was the pollution of this river. They applied a poison, and so the fish died, crabs died, tilapias, fish that were there for a long time, they died due to the pollution because some workers of the company, when they were building it, they had said that they would do that just to not have people complaining. well, we should have recorded this testimony, but we just have someone told us that they said that there was another thing that happened that well, actually I was there. I was there with this legal representative of the communities, this agency. There was no previous consultations, no agreement with this agency, and this license was already coming from the top. When I say the top, is the authorities, the groups of power. There were some influences. So that's how we lose many things. We lose many things. As I was saying before, we are not against development. We know that development is well-being, is productivity, is well-being for the family, for everyone, both local and nationally. But we cannot say that since this company is here, that we have jobs, that we have better lives, that we have benefits. Well, it's just something like the schools, and they adjusted some streets, they paved the streets, but they just give a little. They say they just give a little because it's the first year of working here. So it just doesn't affect only us, those, but also the crops. We are the biggest producers of sugarcane, but we are also affected because of the pollution, the contamination. So they pollute the rivers, they dye everything that we produce. For example, the fruits, they don't grow. Before, people would seed a lot, but now, as they are the owners of the lands, now the land is not available so that people could land a small part of the terrain to plant some trees, fruit trees in Guatemala, which is the main source of food in Guatemala. So this company, well, the land is already not so good anymore. We can say that we have this black black. Okay, this is affecting a lot. Is here it's like a black rain that comes here because it's like harming a lot our lives here. And I know that they are building another space as well, and I'm not sure if they'll have more production, more development for them, but for ourselves, more contamination, more pollution, more diseases, and everything will be worse and worse. Not sure if you have any other question, if it's okay in terms of this.
More question. I'm sorry, we are going over time. Like I would, address this last question to Angela, and then we can wrap this meeting up and follow up offline, like by email or other means. So one last question for you, Angela. If you can like answer in like 1 minute, 2 minutes, summarizing how the situation with CMI. So the question is from Wendy, and it is how is the situation with CMI being covered in Guatemala, and how do you want your story to be told? So yeah, in if that's clear, and if you can cover that in like a couple of minutes, and then we can close the meeting.
The company at the national level, It's big. They have many projections. So, for example, if they have this product, they have everything. They produce everything because yes, they have money, they have power, they have influence. Yes, and they have expanded to other countries like El Salvador. But they have been implementing, for example, restaurants in different municipalities, different departments, department that economically rich, wealthy. So where you can see that the economy is very strong. If you go to any restaurant of them, you can see that they have a lot of demand. They have the queues of people waiting to enter. So I have tried this chicken from their restaurants, but it's not the same quality as before, as the chicken of before. So for sure, they have decreased the quality of the chicken due to the demands that they have. But yes, people continue to visit, continue to go there to these places. Unfortunately, we have this education of not to support the small producers. We always support the big producers. So maybe that's why they have this big demand. They have queues of people waiting for entering the restaurants. Well, I prefer the chicken that I cook at home. I am like this, but I know that the education also affects a little bit because people are not aware that we need to support small producers and medium producers. But the population prefers where there are big populations where it's crowded. That's where people want to go. So that has affected us a lot. When we have like small businesses, they don't value small businesses. The homemade food they don't value. So I love homemade food. Anything that is homemade. I don't like this tradition of going to big chains because we lose our traditions. We want to serve, to participate in small communities. In this life, we are just passing by in this life, so we should contribute to other people. As I said before, we are not against development, but yes, there are some things that are affected, and we should improve them. And we should have goodwill. When there's no goodwill, there's no such awareness. So we don't reach our goals, we don't achieve our goals, we will always find a barrier. But that doesn't mean that we should leave things, that we should stop doing things. No, we need to try another mechanisms to achieve the goal that we have created. Any other question?
Well, I think that's
Bueno,
we can. We are already 10 minutes over time.
no sé si.
Thank you so much. Thanks everyone.
Estoy para servirles. Un abrazo fuerte.
Thank you, Angela.
Un abrazo cálido desde Guatemala.
Thank you.
A warm hug from Guatemala.
Thank you, Merush, for sharing and for being here today, and to everyone for attending. Happy to connect offline. We want to continue these conversations. And have a good rest of your day, week, and weekend ahead. And Looking forward to keeping in touch.